morning. So David is in Easter Island. No, he's on Easter Island. He's not. He's on. I'm assuming he made it there safely. So I'm filling in today, but I appreciate the opportunity to do so. Glad to be here with you this morning. David, last Sunday night, we were talking about this idea of keeping it real, talking to each other about real stuff, what's going on in our lives, what real Christianity looks like. Wednesday night, Brother Van Eaton presented a talk, and it got me to thinking about families, church families, our families, individually as families. He mentioned in his talk Joseph, and some of the struggles that were going on in that particular family. So I started thinking about what needed to be said this morning, what I could say this morning that might be of an encouragement to each of us. And I've come to the conclusion that as I was thinking about families, thinking about my particular family growing up, and thinking about the different families that I've run across and become close to, that there's not a one of us that are normal. You know, we hear the term dysfunctional families, and I've come to the conclusion that the only really dysfunctional family is the normal family. They're the dysfunctional family. At least when I came to that conclusion, I felt a lot better about my own particular family. So if that's not true and you actually come from a normal family, just keep that to yourself, because I'd like to continue to live in the fantasy. No, I do. I honestly believe that as families, we all have our turmoil, we all have our stress, we all have our anxiety, and some have it to a greater extent than other families. I begin to really consider the problems that tend to creep into families. And the more I begin to process this information and think about how it affects our lives, I begin to realize that it's not necessarily the turmoil and the stress itself. It's the inability to get over that, to move on past it, and to stop dwelling on it. And I see a lot of different families unable to move past that. So I ask the question, why is that? Why can we not do that? My opinion, and it's only that, is that a lot of us, especially those of us in the church, have been raised to believe, now listen closely here, we've been raised to believe that we have to get along with our families. We have to. Because if you don't, you're not a good Christian. Now I'm going to challenge that belief this morning, because I honestly believe and have seen that to be a huge stumbling block in a lot of otherwise good Christian families. We're going to use the Bible this morning. I'm going to show you, point out to you some examples in Scripture of biblical families. And they did not have it together. You want to really see some dysfunctional families? Let's look at the Bible. I've been talking to different people in their relationship with parents, their relationship with brother and brother, or sister and brother, or sister and sister. And I have seen so much heartache and turmoil because those relationships are doing this. And it's constantly doing this. And what I would like to point out to you this morning is that is okay. But what's not okay is the consequences of doing this if it's not seen in a Christian manner. And we'll get into that. I've got 3 simple points this morning. And so I hope that what I'm going to share with you this morning will be supposed to be encouraging. Because what I see is a lot of us, myself included, being discouraged by certain relationships that we have. Okay? Mark read in Genesis chapter 4. If you want to go ahead and turn your Bibles to Genesis chapter 4. Verses 6 and 7. Now let's keep in mind here, this is the first family. And what's unique, what's really interesting about this whole family dynamic is mom and dad, okay, Adam and Eve. These were as perfect of parents as you would want to have. I mean, think about this for a second. This is God's first creation of man and woman. Can you imagine how perfect they must have been? And not only that, these were parents who were talking directly to God, and God was directly talking to them. That's pretty impressive. I mean, now my dad, he's a good man. I've always looked up to Dad. But I've never walked in to Dad's bedroom and Dad said, "Hey, I'm having a talk here. Can you not hear God talking to you right now?" I've never had that experience. Adam and Eve, they're talking to God. That's pretty impressive. So I'm thinking of all the families who should have had it right and really, been meshed and joined together, and it should have been this family. God directly had his hand in this family. Let's look at verse 6. And the Lord said to Cain, "Why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door." He's directly talking to Cain. They're having an actual conversation like you and I talk. Verse 8. And Cain talked with Abel, his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and killed him. Now think about this for a second. Here's a brother murdering another brother over what? I mean, were they having this huge inheritance struggle and all of this stuff? No, it was an offering. And one brother felt a little bit bad because he hadn't given as good as his brother. So he killed him. I mean, that's some dysfunction right there. First thing we must do is realize that the perfect family, it's not realistic. There is no perfect family, I'm here to tell you. Doesn't exist. If any family had the opportunity to be perfect, it was probably this one. And even that, you see, you got a brother killing another brother right off the bat. Okay, that's point number 1. No family is perfect. The second thing we must understand and accept, this is point number 2. No parent is perfect. I want to look at 2 different examples. The first is the story about Isaac and Rebekah. These two, as you know, were the parents of Jacob and Esau. And it was obvious from the start that mom and dad had picked their favorites. Okay? Look at Genesis chapter 25. And we're going to look at verses 19, beginning at verse 19 through 27. And these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian, of Paddan-aram, the sister of Laban in Syria. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. Now look at verse 22. And the children struggled together within her. So even before they're born, these two boys are going at it. And she said, If it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb, and the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. Look at verse 27. And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. So it's giving you a different personality types right here off the bat. And then verse 28, and Isaac loved Esau, because he did eat of his venison, and Rebekah loved Jacob. And Jacob sowed pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And it goes on to tell the story there of the turmoil that began to exist between these 2 brothers. So right off the beginning here, you see that Jacob is kind of a mama's boy. Y'all know what I mean when I say mama's boy? He's probably hanging out in the tents with the ladies, and you know, he's mom's favorite. And Esau, he's probably the more manly man. He's out hunting, and he and his dad probably shares a lot of things in common. And so you begin to see dad favoring one son over another, and you begin to see mom favoring another son over the other. All right? Now, I know as parents, those of you in the room that have numerous kids, we don't do that, do we? We don't pick our favorites. You know, Parker is sitting down here. You ought to see his expression just now. Parker's my youngest, and he holds a special place in my heart. And Kaylee, she's the middle child, she's the daughter, and she holds a very special place as the only girl. And Harrison, he's the oldest, so he holds a special place. And each of them are so unique and so different. And the struggle as a parent is not to try to identify so much with one kid that you exclude the other children altogether. Because let me tell you what happens when you do that. When you pick and choose favorites, you set your kids up to war against one another, because they're going to compete for mom and dad's affection. It's a great lesson to learn as parents. Because of these 2 parents that we just read about, the 2 brothers grew to despise one another. Now, later on in life, they do reconcile, but the lesson here is how they acted. To begin with, Jacob would go on to father the Israelite nation, and Esau would father the Edomites. And even these 2 nations couldn't get along. One nation rejoiced in the other nation's downfall and persecution, and vice versa. So far to the extent where these 2 brothers knocking heads against one another, that 2 nations began to knock heads against one another. Why? Mom and dad. Choosing favorites. You know, I look at this situation, I think of all the people to know how parental favoritism can impact brothers. It should have been Jacob. So, one generation, you have Isaac, and he picks his favorite, and Jacob's not it. Okay? And then Jacob grows up, and Jacob becomes a father. Guess what he does? The exact same thing. That blows my, of all the people to get it. It should have been Jacob, because he had to endure that. He knew what it was like. But instead, Jacob picks a favorite. We read the story of Joseph. Joseph is one of Jacob's sons. And that's what got me thinking about this, was the story of Joseph. Turn to chapter 37, chapter 37. Look over a few more chapters. We're talking about families, all these dysfunctional families. We're not even out of the first book of the Bible. Gives me a little bit of hope. Genesis 37. Look at verse 3. And just picture this in your head now. This is funny stuff. Now Israel loved Joseph, that's Jacob. Jacob loved Joseph more than all his children. Comes right out and tells him. He loved him more. Because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and could not speak peaceably to him. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. And he said to them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheep stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheep. Okay, so here you've got this little brother who is the favorite. His other older brothers know that he's the favorite. And he comes to them with this dream, basically just shoving it in their face, saying, guess what? I'm going to rise above you, and you guys are going to fall down, and you're going to fall at my feet, and just agitate me. I see little brothers doing that a lot to the older siblings. It's a common thing. But I did that to my older brother. I think I was Mom and Dad's favorite. And I kind of shoved that in my older brother's nose from time to time. He never plotted to kill me, as far as I know. But they did. They plotted to kill a little brother. One of them stood up and said, you're going to start having second thoughts. Maybe we shouldn't do this. Let's sell him into slavery instead. That's what they did. So here you see a family dynamic of this dad who should have known better about favorites. And he turns right around and does the same thing. And look what happens. Look at the consequences. Now, good does come from this. But I'm pointing out these different examples so you can see that, even in the Bible, we have example after example of dysfunctional families, brothers and sisters not getting along, moms and dads not getting along, choosing favorites. Turn to 2 Samuel. This is the last example I'm going to give you. Is it a doozy? In 2 Samuel we read, it's a sad story, actually, of King David, and extreme dysfunction in his family. We find brothers, once again, murdering other brothers. We find brothers raping their little sisters. We find a son who turns traitor against his own father. And in the end, both boys were dead. And one sister, who is really, you talk about, we're talking about Tamar here. Tamar is double royalty. Her father is King David, and on her maternal side is a king and a queen. So she's got double royalty. She's ruined. The Bible doesn't tell us what happens to Tamar, but during this time, you're talking about consequences that you and I will find hard and difficult to imagine. What happened to this young woman. Let's read. 2 Samuel chapter 13. And it came to pass, beginning in verse 1, it came to pass after this that Absalom, the son of David, had a fair sister whose name was Tamar. And Amnon, the son of David, loved her. So let me just get this so you understand the family situation here. You've got Absalom and Tamar. They're full brother and sister. They share the same mother and father. Okay? Absalom and Tamar. Then over here you have Absalom. Okay? He's the oldest, and he is the stepbrother. His mother is a different mother. So King David is his father, but a different mother. Verse 2. So Amnon was so vexed that he fell sick for his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and Amnon thought it hard for him to do anything to her. So you've got Amnon over here. For whatever reason, he gets infatuated with Tamar because she is beautiful. The Bible describes her as a fair, beautiful woman, young lady. And he is so smitten with Tamar that he can't even eat or drink. He gets sick. He's love struck with this woman. Completely obsessed is what we would say today. Skip down to verse 11. Amnon, he's concocted a scheme to get Tamar into his bedroom. That's what's going on. And when she had brought them unto him to eat, he took hold of her and said unto her, Come lie with me, my sister. And she answered him, No, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not thou this follow. She's begging him, don't do this. She knows what's about to happen. And I, whither shall I cause my shame to go? And as for thee, thou shalt be as one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore, I pray thee, speak unto the king, for he will not withhold me from thee. So even though they're step siblings, it wasn't unheard of to marry off a stepbrother to a stepsister, especially in royal families. So she's giving him an out. She knows what's about to